mention 4 points which I think are extremely relevant for the topic we are discussing today. The issue of water reuse. I remember when Jennifer and Jay, we were together in Seattle, and they mentioned that they were doing this conference on water reuse and whether I would be able to come and speak to you. I immediately accepted the invitation. Because water reuse as a subject is very close to my heart. And the reason is that most countries in the world, but pretty much all cities in the world, their water security goals cannot be achieved unless they really practice water reuse on a very large scale. There is no way you'll be able to achieve water security without water reuse. My president, Ajay Banga of the World Bank, he always likes to remind people that Singapore recycles every drop of water 2.7 times. And what lesson have we learned from Singapore? When you look at the statistics, which all of you know in this room, we don't even treat wasted water as Zahid reminded all of us. I have a minister in India, in my home country. When I mentioned wastewater, she told me, not wastewater, please call it used water. Most countries don't even treat used water or wasted water. So where is the question of water reuse? I think there is a fundamental problem in the way we look at used water in the context of water reuse. But the reason I say this is that there is not enough water for everyone in the world today. If you look at the data, if South Africa data, Minister also talked about it, others have said, South Africa, you seem to have just the perfect balance between demand and supply. But as we all know, there are huge variability in terms of the supply. There are intra-annual variability and there are inter-annual variabilities. Sometimes you get more rainfall, but in different months of the year and so on and so forth. And that requires a lot of resilient planning in the system in the way you might manage your water resources. But there are those challenges in the countries. And water reuse can be essentially the measure that can bring the resilience in terms of your ability to be able to meet the demand-supply gap, given the variability that many speakers have mentioned before. And in that context, I wanted to mention 4 points which I think are relevant for today's discussion. And these are broadly in the category of the policies, technology, financing, and the fourth, which I think is the most important, is the stakeholder engagement. First, in terms of the policy space itself, this goes back largely to the point I was making before. If water security is a stated objective of the governments, it is extremely important that the water reuse is very much part of that water policy in the country. And you have adequate regulations and the institutions and the standards which you need to water reuse to be established in the country. This is currently lacking in most countries. And I think that has to be very much the driving force for promoting reuse on scale in the countries where reuse has to become a priority. And there are good examples here of how you can really create those enabling environment for water reuse to become a practice in terms of how this is implemented in the countries. And there are many countries doing it. Currently, we have World Bank supported programs right now in Turkey, in Tunisia, where this is being supported on a very large scale, nationwide reuse, in India as well, nationwide reuse of water through strong policy level interventions in the countries. And we heard in South Africa that at the city level, but also at the national level, water reuse and the enabling legislation and the regulations is currently being considered as well. The second is on the issue of technology. What I see is that the technology penetration in the water sector is extremely low compared to many other sectors. And that may be because of the capacity issues, because of enabling environment, lack of confidence in the sector, and so on and so forth. But there is a very rapid innovation in the water sector, which I think we should really be able to absorb in water reuse. And technology is not just in terms of very sophisticated, high-tech AIT and Internet of Things and so on and so forth. It is also start looking at how nature-based solutions could be implemented in that space of promoting water reuse as far as the innovations are concerned. And again, there are cities and states and countries which offer very good examples of how technology can support water reuse on scale. The third is the issue of financing. I was talking about before the importance of public financing, which is as a very important signal to the market, with all the other stakeholders. But public financing will never be enough. The financing needs are huge. Our own statistics shows that just for water and sanitation SDGs to be met, there's a gap of close to $180 billion annual. Most governments today are in a fiscally very difficult situation. Their capacity to find additional resources to invest is quite limited. But here is the thing. The governments, through right kind of policies, can create the enabling environment for greater private sector participation in water reuse. And water reuse is an area where you can always establish a revenue stream. You can create some kind of a ring-fenced projects that the private sectors can come forward and invest. And you have very good examples in this continent. You have very good examples in Asia, in East Asia, in Latin America. And I will share with you a story about Chile. In Chile, there's a region called Antofagasta. I don't know whether you've heard this name. This is one of the provinces in Chile. It doesn't rain here at all. But when you go there, you find there's a thriving economy. You have a lot of greenery there, and a lot of economic activity. But they have the Pacific Ocean next to them. And they have been able to establish large-scale PPPs for desalination, for recycling, reclaiming and recycling wastewater, for mining, for drinking water, for irrigation, and so on and so forth, without any rain. It hasn't rained in the last close to 30 years in that place, not even a drop of rain. So it is possible to survive wherein you can create this space. And I met the 35-year-old governor of the province. Came in a T-shirt, and he was sitting next to me, and Zaid, like you, of your age, I guess, slightly younger than you. But the guy had full of energy. He really was keen that attract more investment in the city, in that province. And because he believes that the private sector is bringing not only capital, they also bring expertise, they bring innovation. And I think that partnership will really help. So the point I'm making is that water reuse is an area where the governments can really mobilize a lot of private capital, but with that also comes the private expertise. And there are various models that the World Bank group together, which is World Bank, IFC, and MEGA, we have established a number of standard packages, templates, which can be immediately applied to attracting new investments for water reuse in the countries we work. The last point on stakeholder engagement, which is something to do with the social acceptability. Are people really prepared to really go for water reuse, particularly for portable purposes? And those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, during the last COP in Baku, in the Singapore pavilion, the Singapore National Water Agency, which is PUB, they launched new beer. It's a beer made out of wasted water, used water. And the minister and I basically, we toasted new beer in front of close to 100 people, and of course it was also online. The first reaction of everybody was, oh, how can you drink this? But I did. It was great having that beer with the minister. But the social acceptability, it will take a lot of education. The understanding that the point, Madam Minister, you were making, there was a footnote in your speech was saying, South Africa is a water scarce country, save water. It has to be part of our education. It has to be part of how we bring up our children. And I think that is going to essentially be a very important foundation for us to start really looking at water reuse and its social acceptability. But I think it has to go from bottom to top and top to bottom in how we really, leadership at the top, leadership in the villages, village councils, in the cities, really promote this agenda. But the most important thing is for people to be involved at every step of the way in terms of water reuse, planning, regulations, consultations, and building trust in the institutions which are responsible for water reuse. And I think establishing the regulations for the safe reuse will be extremely important. Yesterday I sat through at least one technical session that the World Bank had helped organize, and there were a number of presentations by researchers from South Africa and also from the government. And I was very pleased to learn that some of these issues that we are seeing globally, it is already being applied here in South Africa. So I think you're already quite ahead of many others on the water reuse. And we also heard in the city of Cape Town that you have a number of projects currently moving forward. But the overall space of stakeholder engagement in promoting water reuse is going to be extremely important. And I would not say that we should immediately jump to potable reuse of wasted water or used water. I think use of wastewater for industrial purposes, for agriculture, for mining, for construction, for services, that can be a very good start. I really do not see why that should not be immediately promoted where the acceptability is much higher, whereas it might take some more time for us to really move into the drinking water space. I want to close by saying that the extent of global crisis today is such that the water reuse will become a norm, not an exception. We are increasingly seeing national water policies already talk about water reuse because of necessity, because of the need to build that reliable supply, water supply at all levels of the economy for agriculture, for drinking purposes, for industry, and for construction. So therefore, a collective effort by all of us, by the experts, by governments, by local governments, by the international organizations to really make an effort to promote water reuse, I think is the way to go forward. This conference is a very important conference in that regard. There's a World Bank group team here in this room. Some of them are leading a global report on water reuse, which will be published later this year. And this is signaling, in a way, the World Bank Group's commitment to water reuse as a very integral component of the water strategy that we would like the governments to adopt and implement. And we are going to step up both our private side of the World Bank Group, that is IFC, but also the World Bank financing and technical support for water reuse in the developing countries where we work. And I would definitely encourage you to engage with the World Bank Group team here, who are here to learn from you and see how we can reflect some of these experiences in the global report. There's also an early idea of some sort of a global water reuse alliance to bring champions of water reuse together in some kind of an alliance so that we learn from each other as we move forward on this journey around the world. And I hope that South Africa will consider being part of this as that initiative moves forward. And Madam Minister, when I have a separate meeting with you bilateral later in the week, we can also talk about that. And I want to again thank all of you for inviting the World Bank to be part of it. Very happy to be here. Really look forward to the deliberations in this very important conference. And thank you very much to the IWA to bring this topic regularly to the attention of the international organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jha, for those remarks. So I asked a question when we started, which was the question posed in this conference: what will it take? And to catch on to Mr. Jha's statement about the words that we use, because words have meaning and they create context of how we see and frame a problem statement. So my offering to the question of what will it take to scale water reuse, our vocabulary around the issue of what dirty water actually is needs to change. So I come from a context of being an engineer who spent most of my time somewhere in the mining sector and surrounded by too many banks, investment people. And immediately, when you give them a problem statement that sounds like a social issue, they lose interest. However, if you give them a problem statement that sounds like an economic opportunity, they pay attention. Now, unfortunately, the world does revolve around money, and no matter how many brilliant engineers you put together, you still need capital to ensure that problems can be solved at scale. So my offer is that what we should be looking at when it comes to the recycling question around water is fundamentally water is a retention body for energy, for mineral wealth, and a series of other contexts. It brings us very close to the water, food, and energy nexus. So when I work with my engineers, the first question we ask when someone says, I have a water body that has been impacted by something, the first excitement is what's in it. Not that it's dirty, it's what's in it. And then the challenge becomes for the process engineers to find a way to get that out in an economically viable manner. Getting the water out is a consequence of the process. It changes the investability question and enables you to think about technology application in an entirely different kind of way. So my offering is that we need to think of wastewater as a resource body that's self-renewing instead of a problem. Okay. As I close off this session, thank you everyone for paying so much attention and staying engaged. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for gracing us with your presence. I have two announcements that I need to make. The first one is those who have been briefed about the media briefing that has to happen. You know who you are. Please head to room 2.6. There will be someone outside holding a sign to guide you there. And second, for those speakers who still have not uploaded their presentations today, please head to room 1.5 to ensure that your presentations can be uploaded and available at the right time in the right room for the time where you have to make such a presentation. From my side, thank you very much. It was a privilege to lead us through this morning. I look forward to the deliberations over the next couple of days, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you.
Today's media briefing. It's my privilege to welcome you to this live media briefing at the International Water Conference on Reclamation and Water Reuse. We gathered here today to address, to recognize the urgent need for sustainable water solutions, and this conference serves as a platform to have these critical decisions on advancing water reuse and reclamation strategies. I'm honored to have an esteemed panel of experts who will also provide valuable insights into policies, innovations, and actions shaping the future of water management. I will start on the side. We have Zahid Badruddin, the MMC, with the City of Cape Town on water and sanitation. We have Dr. Jennifer Mulwandwa, who's the CEO of Water Research Commission. We have Dr. Risimate Matia, who's the Deputy Director General at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Also, Mr. Jay Bagwan from the Water Research Commission, who's also the conference chair. What we're going to do, we're going to allow them the opportunity to each give us 2 to 3 minutes of their opening statements, and after that, I will open the floor to the media to ask questions. Go ahead, you can start.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As was introduced, my name is Zahid Badruddin, and I'm the MMC for Water and Sanitation in the City of Cape Town. And I think it goes without saying that the Cape Town water journey has, in some senses, been a difficult one, but a necessary one for us to learn from, especially as we made our way through the drought and taking those lessons from the drought, ultimately being the need to diversify our water sources. For too long, as a municipality, there was an over-reliance on our surface water, which essentially then led us to the difficult challenges in the heart of a drought, where drastic restrictions and drastic reductions in water usage and water allowances were then put in place by the province and then also the city in itself. The lessons from that ultimately manifested itself in what we call our water strategy, a water strategy that's quite clear in terms of the challenge, I would say, to diversify our water sources. So moving away from surface water to desalinated water, water reuse, which is the gathering that we are here for today, and then also groundwater, and looking ultimately at our catchments itself in terms of alien invasive plant removal. We are personally, I'm quite excited about this conference taking place on the African continent after about 10 years. I think the last one in Namibia in 2013, if I remember correctly. And it's come at quite an opportune moment for us in the city. We've just recently taken over our Zandvliet wastewater treatment works, which is a world-class, state-of-the-art wastewater treatment facility that will ultimately be linked to our Fora New Water project at our Fora water treatment plant as a first, and I think one of the largest water treatment or water reuse projects on our continent, where as a municipality we're preparing ourselves to bring online almost 70 million liters of new water from the water reuse plant, which could be upscaled to about 100 million liters should the need arise. And so, in addition to these significant investments, our mayor has been quite clear in terms of investments in the water and sanitation sector not being a choice. It's something that must be done, as we've heard some of the speakers make clear in the opening ceremony just a moment ago. And so over the next 3 years, as I shared as well, we're investing about 10 billion rand in our capital project, of which about 42% of 120 billion rand, Chairperson, 120 billion rand over the next 10 years in our capital pipeline. 42% of which will go straight into our water and sanitation program, which is how serious, it gives an indication at least of how serious we deal with the need and the urgency of investing in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Jennifer.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think for us at the Water Research Commission, over 50 years in existence, funded by the Water Research Levy, we really have got a responsibility in terms of research, development, and innovation to support the National Department of Water and Sanitation, our municipalities, the national government, and just to have the country at large really reaping benefits of research, development, and innovation. We have in the last, since 2022, developed a stakeholder-centric strategy, and we have now starting to implement the next one for the 7th administration. But what that really means is that we are no longer in the business of doing research for research purposes. Research has to translate into either policy influence, into new knowledge, into supporting government spheres to be able to find answers to complex challenges that they have. In this issue around water reclamation and reuse, we know that the Water Research Commission has been in this business for a very, very long time. However, it is remarkable that when known names of those countries that have pioneered this or that are leading in these technologies are mentioned, South Africa is not mentioned, and we are here to change that game plan. We are here to say that we need to be counted, we need to be acknowledged. And when we have brought the world here, about over 700 people, about 55 countries of the world represented, we are not here to just learn from others. We are here to also teach others a lot. Part of the work that we've been doing recently around community acceptance of water in efficient sanitation, and that's also got reuse elements into that. It's something that is new, how you can develop a technology, but once it's not a service and once there is no community participation and acceptability, you have the challenge. So I think there's those elements that we're also here to teach the world about. Nonetheless, we really want to emphasize, we have to also appeal to the media in terms of the discourse around changing this myth around, water reuse, and that, people will get sick. It is very much important, and I think all responsible governments in the world implement. You have to have safety standards, measures in place. You have to ensure that there is no, doubt around that. I know that with our blue-green drop, we still have got challenges, but we have to be ambitious enough to know that it cannot work unless we put the standards in place. So the faith also on our utility water service providers has to really be improved. People need to have to trust more to believe that we are able to do this. So with this conference, we really are hoping that also with a lot of the technologies that we have developed, that if our own country, as is fashionable, not to take them up, others have done so before, we know, with reverse osmosis and desalination. But we are also trying to push and say, what are others doing? What are others doing, and how can we also integrate that into the work that we do? Thank you.
Thank you so very much, CE. Dr. Rusmati, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. From the department's point of view, we really appreciate the conference. I think we must applaud the Water Research Commission as well as IWA to have actually earmarked this conference. I think most of the people in the media space, you might be well aware that we always say as a country, when we talk about water security, what is the department saying? And our message has been quite clear that when we look at our current water resources, we're actually sitting at a balance. However, some of the intermittent water supply that we're facing in different communities and areas that's got to do with water reticulation, losses in the system. But when you talk water reuse and reclamation, as a department, because we are now integrating other sources of water into our water mix, we are all aware that we are a water-scarce country. We enjoy most of the summer seasons. We're a semi-arid country, which means we have less rainfall. And our country for years, Dr. Jennifer and the team will have told you quite a lot. Even there's a lot of research papers that proves that we are not going to get any more additional water in the world. And South Africa is one of those countries that we are ranked among the top 30 of the driest countries. Now, water mix for us and water reuse and reclamation is what the department is actually championing. In the more climate resilient area, like a country, when we publish our National Water Resource Strategy 3, we actually put a chapter strategically that deals with climate change, climate resilience. How do we do the new uptake of other water uses, wastewater, acid mine drainage, and the uptake of technology and innovation. And one of the key issues that we hope this conference will help us achieve as a country is how do we then derive policy towards such, and how do we then use the private sector funding to come into the space, and also how do we use the media platform to ensure that people get the correct information out there when it comes to water reuse. And while the view that by the end of the conference, and Jay as the chair, we should be able to drive a very strong narrative as the country, which the department can be able to take forward to say this is what we came out of the conference with, and how does that support our national water resource strategy, and how do we then transform our trajectory when it comes to the water mix in the country. So that is our expectation, and we think we're going to achieve the objective at the end of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rismati. I'm going to lastly hand over to the conference chair, Mr. Jay Bagwan.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it was important to start this dialogue in our country. Water reuse has been part of our DNA for the last 60 years. It's just that it was invisible. Roughly in our water strategy to date, we indirectly reuse something like 60 to 70% of our water. And we haven't kind of set a trajectory for direct reuse. And that's the sensitive one, the yuck factor, etc. Only about 4% of our domestic water is directly reused through treatment, etc. But, we live in a very uncertain period now. I mean, we had many years of forward planning, but extreme events, I'm not using climate change, are with us. We're having floods in dry seasons. We're having, rains in, the opposite, but we're having all these extreme events that are beginning to challenge how we provide water. And water reuse is that low-hanging fruit that we have not exploited. 2030 is not far away. Our prediction is that we will kind of reach the limits of our surface water, giving us that privilege in terms of building a water-secure future. So the diversification comes from water reuse, on the coastal areas, desalination, but also going through the extreme events on looking at other sources of water like acid mine water, etc., as a resource, not as a waste, and starting to scale up the application of it. Because like I said, we look at extreme events only as climate related, but Councillor Badruddin can tell you that when the Cape Town dams were beginning to empty, we started to see the silt in it. So what we thought was 30 was actually 20. So these are uncertainties we have to plan for. And that is why starting this dialogue, starting this narrative, and bringing people in, because the yuck factor is very hard to get over, okay? And getting people to understand that we have made significant technology transitions. Innovation is there. We're using a lot of multi-barrier processes. In fact, we can create more clean water than we take from the river. So we are on this trajectory. It's important to get this message across to people in our cities that the future is going to be a water reuse future for a water security kind of future. And we are there with the global community. We are leaders in many, many ways. I mean, a lot of the innovations, have you heard today, has come out of South Africa. But I think we need to enable our scientists, our industries, our practitioners and in our municipalities to absorb more and more of innovation and reuse, that we don't get into the kind of problems we have to deal with in the near future.
Thank you so very much. Without wasting any time, I'm going to hand over to our colleagues to ask some questions. Just raise your hand, and when I give you the mic, speak into the mic. Start with identifying the media organization you represent and your name. Over here.
Hi, it's Kirsten from Water and Sanitation Africa magazine. I wanted to ask, 60 years ago, the world's first direct potable reuse plant was opened on our doorstep. I think actually the Water Research Commission opened it. And so, a lot of the science and the research has come from South Africa. Why do you think it hasn't scaled? Why has it taken so long? And why is it, what has been removed? Or why are you confident there's going to be a greater uptake? And I think it can go to everyone from the DWS maybe in points of policy and regulation to Cape Town, since you are actually scaling it, and WRC.
Okay, in that order, can we start with the MMC and then Dr. Rizmati and then the CE?
I think Jay actually hit it on the head, at least from my perspective, and being a part of these discussions for a short while, not as long as Jay. And he said it now, and he said it yesterday in an interview as well. It's the perception around wastewater, around used water, unconventional water, whichever it is called. And this apprehension to want to make use and invest in it as a potential water source. And from my perspective, there is a lack of will on two folds, I'd say politically and administratively, if we on a local level, if we look at the two arms, to want to go into a discussion that will be a very difficult one when reaching out to our residents. I say again quite confidently that I don't believe it is as a result of a lack of technology, because globally we've seen that the technology does exist to be able to treat to quite an advanced standard this used water, which would make it then safe enough to be recycled, reused in whichever way. But I believe personally it comes down to that inability or unwillingness to drive that conversation, which doesn't turn this into a viable option for some municipalities in our country alone. And I maybe want to touch on what was said now by Jennifer, that the media do have a responsibility to tell the story in a pragmatic way, in an honest way that isn't that doesn't create fear in and amongst our residents around the water quality. Because at least from the Cape Town perspective, we'll be treating this water to such an advanced standard that we'll actually need to introduce additional minerals and so on to bring it back up to the quality in terms of meeting the necessary standards. So to answer quickly your question, comes down to that will and that ability to drive this conversation and the unfortunate stance of some entities shying away from that.
Thank you, Zahid. Jay, do you want to add some comments before we...
Yeah, I like the question, and we have to see it in the context. I mean, about 40 years ago, government took a strategic decision to build infrastructure, and it was linked to strengthening the economy, creating jobs, etc. So that was a strategic decision. So learning from that, I think when you start looking at water reuse, you have to see the economic opportunity around the job creation, the stimulus it would bring in terms of industry. So you have to look at it from a package, not just as, an activity. So I think for the state, etc. And that's the message we were getting from the World Bank, is that how do you structure it, as a economic activity that supports job creation, that supports security, but possibly it can result in a net opportunity for us to export that innovation, technology, and expertise, that kind of we become a net provider of services, to the global world. So I think it's that curation that is very important around it, and not just seeing it that we are plugging a small problem. It's a big economic opportunity that we have to see it.
Thank you, Dr. Rismati.
Yeah, I think the question talks much on what is it that maybe, for instance, the department, as the national regulator, is doing. I think maybe to begin with, we have to fully appreciate the fact that the way water conservation has been handled in the country was not on par. We have always seen water in its own as a social good. We never saw water as an economic good. And this intensive outcome and research that proves. And if you look at how our water system in the country, based on our legislation, has actually been crafted, it's supposed to be self-financing. Somebody must pay for the water. But then the public perception is water is still a social good. It therefore pushes the behavior of people out there to treat water as a social good, and there's no need to conserve it. And the more you lose it, it means now your resources start to deplete now. You don't protect the most limited resources. Now, from the policy's point of view, when the department produced the previous National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, some of these gaps were identified that we need to move into the water mix. We need to start protecting our groundwater. We need to start doing desalination. And now, as I've said, when we updated our National Water Resource Strategy, which in its own we're driving a policy change, a policy shift, so that the sector will start integrating some of the water reuses out there. And we did update our climate change resource strategy, where we are putting a chapter specifically on that, where we're looking at there is a need, even for cities and urban cities, to look at what are you doing about the return flows. We take City of Cape Town, highly economical, but if you look at the amount of water that goes out unattended, regarded as waste, if you use that as the return flows and develop the economic strategy around it, that water can basically offset with clean water. So that strategy looks into that. And as soon as the department puts through a policy change that talks to a shift in the industry, that's how things start to change. And I think the fact that with the blue and green drop that were published, and the message has gone out to a point that even government, which I think is positive, has now elevated water as priority number one from the state president. That on its own, it means the messaging, the research that has been happening, the strategy that has been developed, have now reached a level where there is a full understanding. I think that's how things are changing at the moment.
See, your comments?
Yes, maybe it's not so helpful to come last, but look, we've lived in an area and times of abundance. I think as a country we're very spoiled. Water is there. We never had to worry about it. And when we're thinking about the 60-year window that's been spoken about, then also the type of approach in provision of water was totally different. Your historical Batu stands were reliant on groundwater, which should still be reliant on groundwater because it's about the source that you have there. But the idea and notion of water mix and water availability and limits, it was not the conversation then. Now with the extreme weather events, obviously as a result of climate change, we are now faced with these decisions on a day-to-day. You know, water runs out. You sometimes have energy shifts and challenges that we have in the country. So we really have to now start taking a step back and saying we have to be responsible providers, we have to be responsible users, we have to be responsible citizenry around this valuable finite resource. Now we also have to think around something like the available research, which has, I mean, the WRC has been there for over 50 years. Right now, we're not necessarily researching anew in most of these issues. We are tapping back into what has been acceptable. I think historically it was not playing a key role in informing policy, in advising, in being taken as advisory by those that are, for example, water service providers. But that shift is now changing. But I think also what is important is that we have to really be adaptive, apply strategic adaptive management around our decision making. We have done some research, and I think it's going towards policy shift. The people that make the decisions must be equipped, they must be skilled, they must have the requisite skill. And water service authorities and provisions sits in a political sphere, and which, rightfully or wrongly, I'm not accusing, I'm speaking from an academic perspective. You have to, what is not maybe like other things, like waste, you know, you have to have the skills. You have to understand that it costs you R1 billion, for example, to have a decentralized, a centralized system, and it will cost you the same amount to have smaller decentralized systems. The issue of return flows, using less to convey waste. This is a shift in mindset. Even technically sound people do not really understand when you're saying reuse for black water treatment or for wastewater management. So it's an education that we always have to continuously be upon. But we have to emphasize water service provision is a science. It has to be professionally done. And it also has to be managed not commercially for profit purposes, but the value chain must be funded by someone and must be funded somehow. So we are also in that whole model of studying how we do that. I think we must also not just look at this. Potable reuse is the subject of this current conference, but we must acknowledge that water use generally is across the spectrum. Agriculture is said to be the most allocated, maybe not necessarily the most user, but the most allocated. How do we manage and reduce that and make sure that it is efficiently utilized within the space? We look at industry. How do you have the best technologies to have the maximum yield or the optimum yield, but utilizing less water? So those are the areas in which we must start communicating. It's not all about just making sure that drinking water, but within the space of potable water supply, we're using very expensive water to convey waste, and we need to relook that in the fact that now we are limited with the amount or the volume that's available to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any more questions?
Hi, Marvin from News 24. My question is for Councillor Badruddin. The City of Cape Town has its upcoming budget. Is there any chance that you can perhaps tell us what are the key elements from your department side, how to make the city more water resilient? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marvin. So I want to approach the question from two angles. The first one deals with water supply as a source, and then water supply in terms of it being distributed, reticulated. I'll deal with the second one first. This has been a key priority for us since the beginning of this political term. And it hasn't been a secret that year on year the city has been investing more money into pipe replacements, infrastructure, rehabilitation, fixing our valves, fixing our leaks, so that the water that's being produced at our water treatment plants ultimately then can make its way to our homes, to our businesses, to the hotels as much as possible. And so that infrastructure investment is key. And a key figure there I mentioned earlier is that 120 billion rand in our capital pipeline, of which 42% will go to water and sanitation directly. So it includes some of that work. Then when we look at water as a source, some of the investments making its way into the work currently underway linked to desalination, linked to water reuse, and then obviously linked to our wastewater treatment works as well. A number of these plants have been underinvested for many, many years. And so the priority has really shifted with this government with a view to invest in the sector within our city so that we can prepare for a growing city and ultimately ensure that we're resilient and that our water security is in some senses guaranteed. So some takeaways from our budget, as we'll present at the end of this month, will be ongoing investments in our pipe replacements. At the moment, we've got about 535 million rand invested in that. That will likely increase so that we can continue. We've moved, by the way, from replacing 0.1% of our pipes at the start of this term to at least 1% of our pipes at this moment, and our ambition is to push that to at least 2% by the end of this term. That's the challenge that the Mayor has set, and that's what we're working towards as an administration and as a government, and then investing in our water security by making sure that in the light of ongoing electricity challenges and chemical challenges, that those risks are secured. And then, as I've mentioned, the wastewater treatment works needing to receive some investments, major investments, by the way. We've just taken, or a little while ago, Zandvliet was completed, based in Khayelitsha. We're currently working on our 5.5 billion rand wastewater treatment works in Potsdam. We'll be taking some of the delegates around there. And then planned is our Macassar wastewater treatment works, Mitchell's Plain wastewater treatment works, as well as the Athlone wastewater treatment works. And so I'm quite excited because the message from all the speakers today was, and Mr. Kumar Jha made it quite clear, that globally governments are underinvesting in the sector. Some even less than 1% is what he said. But very confidently, the water and sanitation budget in our city is the biggest guzzler, let's say, of the budget since the beginning of our term, and will continue to be so with the next presentation at the end of the month.
Thank you so much, Zahid.
Good morning, Dutu Zalanen from Eyewitness News. I'm not sure if this was mentioned, maybe I missed it. Is there a time frame set to see these goals and plans realized fully, where the country is, leading in the direction of water reuse? And in these conversations that you are having, are you seeing, is there appetite from other local governments and provincial governments in in entering that field of where they reusing the water? Thank you.
I think it's important to acknowledge that we don't have a choice. We are no longer in the space where there's so much water and so much availability. We are in a stringent and limited time frame. Therefore, it is imperative. But I think also, if you've seen the review of the Water Services Act, Doc, you see that also that there are limitations in terms of municipalities being able to proceed with development if there is no allocation. So, if the carrot did not work, now we're going the stick route. So we are saying, and we are not locking you to say, go and get a new system. Get into consultation with developers around. There is an investment that needs to happen. Here are technologies that are available, and here, how do we work together? So it's really that integrated approach. I think it is really getting that done and pushing everybody to work together around that. The time frame is now, I must say. We in some of the other areas, literally, we do not have assimilative capacity to look at other things. But what has been good also, we are on the ground piloting, and we are also looking at upscaling. For example, in our sanitation systems, we just opened some, handed over some here in Cape Town the other day, where we are reticulating or reusing, recycling the water for waste management. And if you can, whatever volume it is, it means that you are offsetting and making much more water available for drinking water purposes, and that's key.
Any further comments, Zahid?
From a local perspective, we have the ambitious deadline of 2030, where towards 2030 we are wanting to produce 300 million litres of new water from new water sources. And so this looks at bringing online desalination as we work towards 2030, bringing online water reuse as we work towards 2030, and then the ongoing work around alien invasive plant removal and using the ground sources as an abstraction point, but also responsibly re-injecting in our managed aquifer recharges into the groundwater itself. So there are two, I would say, date deliverables for us as a city. We've already just concluded our Section 78.3 process for desalination, which essentially looks at funding options for the desalination plant, our first permanent desalination plant in the city. We're about to go into Section 78.3 also for our water reuse process, which will ultimately be the same conversation. These aren't cheap projects. These are projects well into the billions. And so the question that we're wanting to answer as a municipality is, we understand that we need these water sources, but are there other ways of funding these water infrastructure projects other than just taking it from our residents, looking at public-private partnerships as a potential option. So our consultants and the engineers within the directorate are currently undertaking that public participation process, putting together the options for us, and then we aim towards the end of the year to ultimately take this to council where that decision will be made. So about 2027 is when we hope this work will finally get spade into the ground, and as we move towards 2030 and after 2030, where the water will finally come online in our city, which is quite exciting because this is not 2050, this is a few years away. So it is quite a challenge, and I'm confident that our administration, the engineers, the experts, the scientists in our city are driving that as fast as they can, because the mayor has been very clear about this challenge to us. It's not an option.
And also the input of the International Advisory Committee, that's very key. So we are not also just saying we have left ourselves to our own devices. We do have, and the WRC is really pioneering, providing support, as well as the department in terms of the work that is being done from a policy perspective. So that integrated approach really should yield the results by the time frame you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I think we may have space for one more question and wrap it up.
For reuse that are smaller and more rural municipalities can use, because not everyone has the budgets that Cape Town has or the ability to attract and retain skilled personnel. So are there accessible technologies that the smaller municipalities can also use and adopt for reuse?
Yeah. So I think every situation has a context. It's also kind of depends on footprints, amount of land available, etc. So you'd find in a lot of metros and cities, you tend to go for very advanced systems. In the rural areas, you can use a lot of nature-based solutions because land is available, and we already have innovations and technologies around constructed systems that use very low energy, I wouldn't say low technology. The technology is quite advanced around how we structure different types of plants and media, etc., and we get the same outcome. So yes, that is available, and we see a lot of it happening in the more developing world as an option, because it's low maintenance, low energy, and it's more resilience to extreme events as well. So, yes.
Okay.
We good? Okay, one last question.
How do we export best practices from Cape Town? And this, I think, might be Dr. Mattia, from Cape Town to other metros that are arguably in a more dire circumstance, like, for example, Gauteng now and Mexico, does national government have a role to play?
With regard to Cape Town, the funny part about Cape Town is wherever you go, globally, if you want to tell a good story, you always have to talk about Cape Town. And I think it's a norm now, and we understand the changes. We are using the lessons for Cape Town in other provinces. For instance, Gauteng, as well as the eThekwini. From the ministerial point of view, and the department has established a knowledge base where some of the experts who were involved in Cape Town when we, for instance, dealing with Day Zero, some of the technologies they are using. We are looking at City of Joburg, which is crucial. You know there's challenges happening in Gauteng, so we established a platform where we are strategically monitoring issues of the new uptake of technology, water reuse, programs that the city is basically implementing. eThekwini is going through a similar challenge, and we are also monitoring that. We are supporting them. And in actual fact, that strategic support does not only come from the department's point of view presidentially. There are 2 working groups that have been set up by the president, integrated within the presidential task team run by the deputy president. So Gauteng and eThekwini, to be specific, are central, and we're using the same lessons that we picked up in City of Cape Town. We've done the same in Nelson Mandela Bay when we were facing Day Zero, to say how do we then use the same example as City of Cape Town, and those experts are the ones that we're utilizing, working together with the World Group, of course, World Bank Group, that are integrated in that. So we are using the examples for Cape Town for other cities in the country.
Okay. Thank you so very much, colleagues. I have to release some of the speakers. We don't have any more time. Okay.
Sorry.
This is the last
yes,
comment.
Thank you. Sorry, colleagues on the table. The success of water reuse is, I would say, dependent on our ability to build trust in the technology. And you as media, and I really do want to emphasize this, are going to play an important role, especially when the city starts to speak about our intention to roll water reuse out in our municipality. Yes, there is a concern around the source of the water itself, but that then must be juxtaposed around the technology, the expertise, not only locally but internationally as well, that is guiding our ability to test, treat, and then introduce the water into our drinking system. And really, it's just an appeal to the media that when we start this conversation, please be fair and help us introduce the facts of this conversation rather than to focus on the fears, because the fears, I believe, can be allayed by building trust and confidence in the technology and the expertise that is available, and that you're going to see at this conference. So please do take time to visit some of the stands and engage in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, colleagues. If you need maybe one-on-one interviews outside of this press conference, you can talk to myself or Nobile. Thank you so very much for your attendance and for making this a success. We really appreciate you, colleagues.